The exclusion zone stays. Protesters against LGBT teaching are told they must stay away from the school gates in Birmingham.
When people say things about you that are not true, that's very difficult, and it's taken us to come to court, to High Court, to clear that up.
For weeks at the gates of a primary school in Birmingham, there were loud protests claiming teachers were promoting homosexuality. Now pupils working hard inside Anderton Park Primary School aren't disturbed by demonstrations outside. Today, the High Court in Birmingham ruled an injunction stopping the demos at the school gates should be made permanent.
What the case has shown is the real contrast between what has always happened at Anderton Park and what was being portrayed was happening. And there was absolutely no promotion of any one type of anything, because we can't do that. That goes against equality and against the Equality Act.
The judge said that the protests had had an adverse effect on teachers, pupils and local residents, and that none of the claims made against the school were true. But those behind the protests say they won't stop and they will appeal the decision.
I've never questioned the rights or wrongs of homosexuality, and I never will question those rights or wrongs, because it's not about that for us. It was about, firstly, we had no consultations and there was no asking of parents, is this age appropriate?
Since June, demonstrations have been allowed to continue outside the exclusion zone, a few streets away from the school building. Despite today's ruling, the protesters say they will continue to voice their concerns about LGBT issues being taught in school outside of the exclusion zone. They haven't been able to protest here outside the school gates since June. Before that, they were here on a weekly basis.
It's quite disturbing for my child, because I don't want him coming home and saying our children have a choice and all that, you know what I mean?
The protesters were peaceful and they didn't cause any disruption.
Anderton Park Primary has always maintained it's teaching children about equality, something that all schools will be required to do by September next year. But the government says it will be up to teachers to decide how issues of sexuality and relationships are taught. Stacey Foster, ITV News, Birmingham.
The ban on protests outside a school gate in Birmingham will stay. The City Council applied for the injunction in the summer after angry exchanges about the teaching of LGBT relationships at Anderton Park Primary in Borsall Heath. It's one of several who were teaching inclusion, but the focus of demonstrations were outside this school. Today, the High Court ruled an exclusion zone should stay. Here's Amy Cole.
These protests about the teaching of LGBT relationships have been a source of great frustration and tension. When they started to affect the well-being of staff and children, Birmingham City Council took legal action. Since May, there's been an injunction banning protests outside the school gates. Today, a judge ruled it will remain, a relief for the school's head teacher.
We will carry on doing what we do. We will work with parents, families, the local authority, and any new legislation that comes from the DFE. And we are particularly thrilled that the school has not been criticised at all in anything that the judge has said.
The decision to continue with an injunction was based on a number of factors. That the defendants, mainly 3 people, including Shakeel Afsar, who is responsible for organising the protests, distributed leaflets saying that teachers were promoting homosexual relationships, which wasn't true. That a number of allegations were made by defendants, caught on this mobile phone footage.
There are paedophiles in there! I can't put half of it up! Give it here! Give it here! There are paedophiles in there! This is a paedophilia agenda!
It isn't true, and neither is their claim that children were being taught sexual acts and paedophile teachers were being employed, and that the protests were having an adverse impact on the 21 teachers who are suffering from high levels of stress and anxiety.
Equality is hugely important to my school and to me, and as tough as it's been, you know, in a strange way, I'm glad we were part of this, to be part of a decision which does affect all schools, because it was always much bigger than Anderton Park.
The defendants say they're bitterly disappointed with today's ruling.
Our religious convictions do not permit us the luxury of cowering to the council and the court's attempt to silence us. As Muslims, we are under a religious obligation to stand up for our faith and to defend our beliefs and to peacefully resist any compulsion to act in a way which runs opposite to what our beliefs are.
The protesters have vowed to continue their demonstrations, but the Head Teachers Union says they need to stop.
What we say is to protesters is, look, you know, this is about the Equality Act, it's about those fundamental British values, it's about preparing children for life in modern Britain. And if they've got a problem with the law, they need to take that to the lawmakers, to Westminster, not have protests outside of schools, which again causes great harm to those children, to those parents who just want the best for their children and young people in those schools.
The judge did lift an injunction on social media. Many teachers had complained of being abused online. It's certainly been a challenging time for all concerned.
And Amy joins us now from outside the court where the decision was made earlier today. Amy, where do we go from here?
Well, today Mr. Justice Warby told the hearing, which was held here, that he did not seek a restriction on what the defendants express, but the way in which they do it, such as handing out leaflets, using megaphones and making allegations which are simply not true, which you saw in my report. Looking ahead, we must remember that the Department for Education is introducing compulsory relationship teaching next year, helping children understand that the society that they're growing up in and learning to foster respect for others and recognise differences. Now, Birmingham City Council, who brought the legal action, says that schools will consult with parents. They'll be able to raise their concerns and their points of view and ask any questions. But ultimately, the schools will decide on how this part of the curriculum is taught. The council says that Birmingham is diverse and inclusive. Those are its strengths, and that it will continue to work with Anderton Park to help resolve any ongoing issues. It says it will always stand up for the rights of children, whoever they are and whatever family they're from.
Amy Cole, thank you.